Welcome to my Only One Outlier podcast show, where I'll be exploring the data science career tips with the industry experts who can share their experience and journey with us. I am your host Nirmal, from a new grad to an early career data scientist, from a data analyst to a data engineer, or anyone who wants to start or transition their career into data science. We will bring you all the do's and don'ts to help you guide in your data career path. Hello everyone, this is Nirmal and welcome to my Only One Outlier podcast. So today on my show, we are joined by a seasoned product leader with over 11 years of experience across tech and banking and fintech. She specializes in AI-driven solutions, digital transformation, and having the best customer experience. From driving business outcomes to leading cross-functional teams and crafting customer-centric solutions, she has done it all. And you guessed it right, we're going to talk about product management and AI today. Welcome, Riya, to my show.
Thank you so much, Nirmal. And thank you so much for that great introduction.
Yes, I
Yeah,
did a very brief one, but I will let you do a little bit more justice on your own behalf for the introduction.
yes, absolutely. So I started my career as an engineer, specifically an Android and an iOS developer back in Mumbai, India. And I am from India. And when I was working as an Android developer back in 2013, there was this one app that I built, which was an augmented reality app. And then I actually observed that after I built that app, a lot of people actually started using it in more ways I could think of. And that actually got me interested in focusing more on human problems and human solutions rather than coding technical features. Now, while at Oracle itself, I built a startup, an e-grocery delivery startup. It was a great experience, but it failed precisely because we did not realize the human story that for most of our target customers, middle-aged housewives in Mumbai, grocery shopping was a social activity that they used to enjoy. And that led me to being even more interested in focusing on people's stories and how they use products. So I moved to a startup as the head of product. And then I got into Stanford for my MBA and I moved to the US. At Stanford, I learned more about how to think of product strategy long term. And while I was at their business school, the Graduate School of Business, I created a new way to build product roadmaps purely using past data. Living in Silicon Valley, I saw the entrepreneurial energy and the nothing is impossible attitude. And that is what inspired me to continue being in product even after graduating. In fact, I remember at Stanford University, no matter what idea you have, no matter how crazy your idea is, there is always someone who's willing to listen to you and to build the product with you. Once I graduated as a product manager, during the first few years of my post-MBA career, I was lucky to build and launch quite a few AI products. One of them was all about classifying invoices using decision trees. Technically, it was an algorithm with a schedule for training, along with a federated learning model. But human-wise, it was more. It allowed accounting managers working for Oracle's customers to go home on time. It was then when I really started thinking how one should think about when building AI products as a product manager.
That's awesome. Thank you for covering it. I think the best part there was the human story. And I think we certainly missed that. Mostly, I come from tech background. Like you said, you started your journey as a developer, right? So during my undergrad, I also went to computer science school and mostly doing the coding and stuff. I think sometimes we feel like, at least I felt like I was somewhere blindsided by the product connecting with the human factor, right? And I think that is important on any of the area today. And I will touch upon that quite a bit because when we try to connect product to AI, that's where it kind of makes sense, So, but I absolutely agree, and thanks for highlighting that how human factor and storytelling piece is the main driving force behind this product. So one of the things that always comes to my mind is when we talk about like your journey, right? And it kind of looks fascinating getting the degree from Stanford and working in the product area in the fintech for over a decade, right? So throughout the journey, you have definitely come across challenges and opportunities, right? Opportunities is what we got here today, but the challenges are something that we don't talk, or sometimes people are not too comfortable talking about it. And The reason I want to bring this up is there might be people in my audience who are listening, going through maybe similar situation. If it can resonate back to them, I want to know about your challenges in this road, right? Like what were the major ones, and especially how you tackle them is more important for me, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. And that's such a great question. And you're right. Challenges are things that we don't talk about normally. In my case, the two biggest challenges that come to mind that I faced, number one was networking. When I first moved to the US, it was the very first time I was working in a country other than India. So while Stanford was the best start of the American life I could have asked for, once I graduated, I realized the importance of networking. But I was just starting from scratch. And I quickly realized that networking is an exponential process, meaning that you need network to grow your network. And that can determine the opportunities that you get. Not knowing many people in the industry was the biggest challenge at first, but it tapered down as I steadily got to know more and more industry leaders, including yourself. So that was number one. Number two was learning to focus more on the people using my products and not the technical details, which is what we discussed just now. Before, of course, before becoming a product manager, I used to be an engineer.
Hmm.
I could spend hours on end trying to make a button behave in a certain manner on an Android or an iPhone app. But being a product manager is different. It means that you're now expected to understand the people's problems and figure out the best solution that works well in their context. The first year after my MBA was challenging since my mind would always veer into the engineering details. I remember my first ever PRD, the product requirements document, actually had suggestions about the React components to use. And I was promptly told by the engineering team to let them figure out the implementation and for me to focus on the customers. So yeah, the two biggest challenges. And these networking is something that I'm still building and learning to focus on the people. That's something that I'm learning more and more about every single day, even after being on product for many years.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think we kind of circle back again to the people part, right? And that's extremely important. I totally agree and cannot deny on both of your challenges and how you kind of like overcome it. Networking is something that I also tell everyone to spend some time building it. You know, it's gonna matter on a long run for you to excel in your career, right? So now on the people side, there's one thought that just came to my mind while you were talking was people talk about AI taking over our job, and we'll jump into the framework and stuff that you have in a
Yeah.
little bit. But from customer standpoint, when we build the product, how they use it, how they are finding it across the journey, and then if you're not tackling the right problem or the pain points for customers, then your product probably is not doing the enough justice to sell itself to them, right? So now we are living in the age of AI where things get automated quickly with few lines of prompts. Your take on like the people factor, how much human interception is required in the product management part? What do you feel about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's again a really good question because I have two takes on that, not just one.
Okay.
So, take number one is you're right. Right now, there is a lot of hype on AI, and we keep hearing a lot about really interesting AI use cases. What I feel like is that those use cases would survive in AI, which are the boring use cases. I remember I talked about just a few minutes ago using
Hmm.
AI to classify invoices. On the face of it, sounds really boring, but that is where AI can really come in, automate the boring tasks so that we can do the interesting things. So I do feel that as the hype goes away, more and more use cases, which are the boring ones, would become really important for AI to automate. So that's number one. Take number two is, and this is something I'm going to discuss during my framework as well.
Hmm.
But yes, take number two is the importance to focus on the actual story that you're building. So, for example, let's say you are using AI to personalize an app
Hmm.
to determine what features should show up on an app, let's say. With AI, you're essentially creating a new story. Like without AI, maybe the story or the way the user would have used the app would have been different. But because of AI, it's now much better. And that means that you're creating a new story for that user. So look at the human story. And the other example, the invoice classification itself, the third time I'm coming back to it, helping an account manager who would have spent hours classifying invoices, helping that person go home on time. A better story. So focus on the human stories.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Really, really good thought-provoking point there. I think recently I made a post on LinkedIn saying that the AI hype is there, but don't get overwhelmed on that and focus on some of the repetitive and tedious and boring tasks, like you said. Because when we talk about data science workflow, everyone talks about 80% of the tasks is data cleaning and pre-processing, and that's really tedious. If you ask any data scientist, they're like always keen to learn more about building models, at least doing more research, and nobody wants to do the data cleaning part. That's the reality, but you have to do it. There's no excuse. However, as long as you set up the right validation steps and everything that you have been doing so far, and you can automate that, that is where the use case for AI is, right? So I mean, 80% of
Yes.
the work is a lot. So now you can spend that 80% of your time,
Yeah.
on doing something noble or something interesting that you have been craving to do it. So
Oh, yes.
you just did touch upon the same thing. So yeah, that's really important, that
Yeah.
sometimes we feel like, hey, AI has to have a very high promising use cases, advanced use cases. But no,
Yeah.
look into the return on investment, right? For something
Yes.
that you build, it could be very low hanging fruits that
Oh,
you
yes.
you think, but saving the time and resources is gonna ultimately create an impact, right? So I think
Oh, yes.
that's what people are forgetting.
Yes. And you know what? And not just that. And that's such a great point, like saving the time and resources on the boring thing so that we can focus on the interesting thing. And you know what? There's one aspect within this where data scientists have a superpower. So let's say you're trying to build an AI product for healthcare.
Hmm.
But now in healthcare, now I'm not in the healthcare field, so everyone who's listening, disclaimer, I'm not a healthcare professional, but still, imagine you're building a product for healthcare.
Hmm.
Typically, what I've seen is that a lot of times data that you might get might be really skewed toward maybe one demographic or one area. So let's say if you live in California, the data you would be able to gather would be from mostly from hospitals in California.
Right.
That can introduce unintended biases. And that is something that only a data scientist can actually help mitigating, not even a PM, but a data scientist. And if that is actually managed, then yes, then the AI use case, the one that we talked about automating the mundane and the boring to improve the lives of people, that can really happen.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think this is one of the topic. The bias is itself a big topic. So, I mean, we can probably spend hours studying it. But thanks for bringing that up. I think I remember on one of the conference I spoke, I think in UCLA, there was a conference on responsible AI, and there was a big chat about the bias. And I met someone from a healthcare startup company, and then he mentioned the same thing. We can do a lot of stuff with AI, but there is still has to be domain expertise or the experienced data scientist to look at what data we have collected so far, what is the distribution of it, is this make sense before we feed into model, right? If
Yep.
you automate the entire pipeline and trust the AI to do complete data cleaning to data validation to modeling to everything, I think we might be giving more freedom to AI than it should, right? So
Yeah.
this is where I think we still gonna have human factors in the loop, and making sure that all the data curation, feature engineering, everything kind of like is following without such kind of explicit or implicit biases, right? So very important. All right, so let's change gear a little bit. It's kind of interesting that we chatted offline a little bit about your framework, that how AI ties with the product management, right? So tell us something about this, framework of how other product managers can benefit from it. Or and today I think you don't really have to have a product management title to work on product, right? So I interact with product
Yes.
managers every day, and then it's always valuable to have the product sense. They call it product sense, right? And
Yeah.
the product data scientist role is getting extremely popular as well, which is a kind of mix of product management and the data science. So I'm more excited to talk about this framework.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. So the framework that I've created, now I'm going to start with the motivation, like what actually necessitated creation of a framework to combine AI with product management, number one, and then I'll go into the actual framework. Does that sound good?
That sounds awesome.
Perfect. So these days, with all the hype about LLMs and agentic AI, what I'm observing is that a lot of times people are using LLMs in three ways. And these days, LLMs are the hype, as in are most of the people when they think of AI, they quickly think of ChatGPT or Perplexity, etc.
Hmm.
So the first way people are normally product managers are using LLMs are essentially summarizing user interview notes to glean any user pain points. Now, this step can lead to a lot of pain points getting missed. So that's number one. Number two, people are also using LLMs to actually create product roadmaps. Now, this might result in product roadmaps. This might result in like roadmaps getting created that are based on roadmaps that have been published online in the past and not based on the actual need of the user or the people or the business. And number three, a lot of startups these days are deciding to add AI first and then thinking about which AI features to add. In fact, these days, because there is so much hype about AI and a lot of companies actually want to call themselves AI companies, that is something that is actually happening now. And that could result into companies building AI use cases that are not needed at all. That's what my framework actually intends to solve. So yeah, I'm going to take a pause here to see if there are any questions before I move further.
No, no, that's awesome. I did like the fact that everything started from understanding where is the problem statement and why we need this, right?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So the framework that I have created actually involves three pillars. Pillar number one is using AI for product road mapping. And that does not mean just ask ChatGPT what roadmap I should use. No, this is an actual technique based on existing ones. So that's pillar number one. Pillar number two is how to think when deciding what AI features to add. So not just thinking of adding an AI feature and then figuring out what AI features I should be adding. No, there's a systematic way to go about this. Then pillar number three is having a clear data strategy that involves data collection, data management, and bias mitigation. So we'll go into each pillar one by one. So pillar number one, using AI for product road mapping. Now, I remember when I was at Stanford GSB, the Graduate School of Business, I was interning at a company. So in that company, I actually saw that we had NPS data from a lot of our past customers. And at the same time, we also had feature usage data. So what I ended up doing was I thought of NPS, and NPS is nothing but a calculation that you do. So normally you send out a survey to your customers saying, hey, how likely are you to recommend my product to others? 0 to 10. 0 meaning, no, I'm not never going to do it. To 10, yes, absolutely. And then if the customer gives you more than 8, then that customer is a promoter. If the customer gives you 6 or 7, that customer is a passive person. And then any customer giving you a rating below 6 is a detractor. And to calculate NPS, we basically see the number of promoters minus the number of detractors. So NPS, I thought of it as the objective function, and then I thought of feature usage. And feature usage, think of this as just a binary value, whether feature A is being used or not, 0 or
Hmm.
1. So I was able to create variables here. And based on this, I was actually able to create a simple logistical regression model that created a correlation between features and NPS. And you need not stop there. You can actually think of even feature combinations and how they correlate with NPS or the objective function that you're looking for. Now here, the biggest benefit that you're going to get as a PM, product manager, or even a data scientist is you're going to understand what is going on. You're also going to understand which features work really well together. So let's say you found out that feature A and feature C together are highly positively correlated with NPS. That means that a customer who's actually using feature C, if you market them feature A as well, then your retention might go up. Similarly, let's say feature A and feature B are negatively correlated with NPS. That means that if a customer is using both feature A and feature B together, then you can tell them while talking to them that, hey, maybe there's a different way to use the product. Insights like this can be really gleaned when thinking of past data and when thinking of a customer metric like NPS as the objective function. And then you can use all of these insights to actually create a product roadmap. One biggest thing here is that the final step of creating the product roadmap is a human process. Here, AI is helping you glean insights. AI is not helping you actually create the product roadmap. That is something that you're doing.
Hmm.
So that's pillar number one. Before I go into pillar number two, any questions so far?
Yeah, yeah. Pillar number one sounds interesting. So you are kind of leveraging AI for the overall road mapping based on historical learnings or something that you can create on your behalf using a simple model like a logistic regression, right? You mentioned the function, I mean, the net promoter score or NPS that you just mentioned. That's just one example. So if they have any other scoring, they can actually utilize that, right?
Oh,
One,
yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, and
Yeah, go ahead.
one of my take here is now when you mention the features, what features will be correlated, right? So what kind of features we're talking about here? Like is it the product features or some data attributes coming from the data collected from customers that is actually impacting the NPS, right? We're trying to see that correlation.
Yeah, it's actually the former, like
Okay.
product features. So let's say you built an app. Let's say you built a social media app and
Right.
you have some features like posting, commenting, etc.
I see.
So posting would be feature A, commenting would be feature B, and so on.
Okay, now it makes sense. Okay, yeah, I was
Yeah.
thinking as a data scientist, I always go when it says feature, go in the data attribute label feature,
Oh,
right?
yeah. That is where the different languages. So product management language is slightly different from the DS, the data science language. So yeah, a bit of a language barrier there.
No worries. Thanks for clarifying. So now another question that kind of came up to me is when you mentioned these features, and now this is an example where we are trying to improve the existing product to the existing customers, right? So the customers has to already be there for us to give the NPS back, right? Or at least and then we may have to leverage similar strategy, but in a different way if we want to target on the new customers, for example, completely in the acquisition side. So will that be still within the framework, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I see where you're going. So one way we can actually think about new features or new improvements based on past data
Mm-hmm.
is by looking at feature groups that really work well together. So for example, as we said, let's say feature A and feature C together as a combination are highly positively correlated with NPS.
Mm-hmm.
That means as a PM, now I would need to come in and start thinking, hey, what is it about feature A and feature C that is making them gel really well together? And that's a treasure trove of insights. And that can really help you understand what's going on the customer side and what I can actually build next that actually combines the advantages of feature A and feature C together.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense to me. All right, let's roll into pillar two, right? What we
Yeah.
covered there. So the first one you said we use AI for the product road mapping and try to understand how there is strong correlations, what features can matter for the KPI improvement or like overall whatever score you are using as your success criteria, what is that getting impacted by, right? So that we can probably see on our road mapping to give those features more importance to look on, right? So and again I want to add again, maybe data scientists and ML engineers will also be listening to this conversation. When we say features is actually the features in the product, like hitting
Yes.
the like button, posting a
Yep.
comment, that kind of feature. So in the product
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So from a product manager standpoint, features are actual product features and not the variables. And I know where you're coming from because I remember taking a deep learning course with Dr. Andrew Ng at Stanford. So I know the language that you're referring to.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that is something that we should keep in mind.
All right. Awesome. So let's move on. This is interesting. I am learning a lot.
Yeah,
So pillar two.
yeah, yeah, perfect. So pillar two is all about how to think when deciding what AI features to build. Now, One, like, of course, normally what it's really tempting to think about, I want to add an AI feature, so let's start with AI and then work backward to identify the problem that it can solve. That's the temptation. But Pillar 2 in my framework says otherwise. In my framework, Pillar 2 involves first taking the common product management steps of manually interviewing users and then understanding their pain points, doing root cause analysis on those pain points, getting to the root problems that we should solve, and then prioritizing them. So far, there has been no AI involved in the process. It's all manual, traditional product management. Now the next step is to actually start thinking, how would I solve this problem in a human manner without any AI? Imagine it's 2022. Like before the time LLMs became really famous, I think 2017 is when the LLMs were invented. So imagine that is still 2022. How would you solve this problem in 2022 without any common language model help or even without AI for that matter? Once you've identified the human way of solving that problem, that's when AI comes in as as a scaling solution. As in, the last step is how would you use AI to scale up your solution? So, in summary, don't think of AI as the solution. No, the solution is yours. The solution is the human solution that you have actually thought of, is the way to scale that up. How do I solve that problem faster and for many more people than I would have done in a human manner? So that's the right way, or that's a much better way to use AI for when thinking of what AI features to build. Gonna pause here again to see if any questions.
No, I think this is a great point. It kind of takes me back to the traditional approach. I mean, we have been always using. If we have to put a machine learning system, like even AI or whatever, right? So ultimately, we can call it as a automated function. The function that we identified that actually identifies the right pattern and helps us to kind of solve the problem, for example. That function acts, right? We can call that as our AI component. And
Yeah.
you said it right, because that function X should learn from the existing problem how humans are solving it and how
Yes.
closely that function is going to map the exact same functionality. But then you will probably get more accuracy, more scalability, right? If you do it right. So I think that's very important. So now my question to you is, today I think we are in a hype mode of AI. But there is definitely a lot of benefits or use cases I can already see. One of the burning problem, and I hear from most of my colleagues and network people who are kind of in the management layer or even in the uh, BP or higher layer, that from the high up, they always get enormous amount of pressure that we have to ship AI power features quickly to solve. It's just because, and sometimes the people who are, you know kind of like looking at the problem may not look it at a bottom up, but then it's coming down from the top down, right? And you now in a situation, and mostly I think the product managers are mostly in that position where they will feel the pain and the pressure, saying that, hey, one side you have to evaluate the human factor. If
Yes.
you don't identify or uncover the problem effectively, you don't know what you're solving, right? Like you said. And the other side is like the time pressure, like let's move fast, fail fast, right?
Yeah.
Have you come across like, this is kind of like not related to the framework directly, but I just want to
Yeah.
understand your experience, right? Like how does that thing balanced out with you so far, right? So
I can imagine a lot of product managers probably are facing this in the industry.
yeah.
Um, right. You have a pressure to bring in AI, but here is somebody named Riya telling you that, hey, think of the problems first, think of the human solutions first, and then bring in AI to scale it up. The way I would balance this is, as a product manager, you've probably identified a lot of pain points and you've probably identified solutions to those as well. Now, if you are under pressure to bring in AI, then think about which solution could do really well if I scale it up.
Hmm.
Choosing which solution could actually benefit a lot if we scale it up. There are some solutions that get better as you actually if you actually implement it for more people. For example, social media that we talked about. Let's say you're building a social media app. If that app has more people, if it's scaled up, then inherently the app does better. So then what you should do, once you have all the human solutions, make a list of those and then choose those solutions that would get better with scale. And then bring in AI for only those. So identify the solutions that get better with scale. Not all solutions can do that, but some can.
Awesome. Yeah, makes sense. So let's move on to your next pillar, right? So
Yes.
I think it's a three pillar framework, if I have
Yep.
understood it correctly so far.
Yep. Yep.
So we have covered pillar one, AI for product road mapping,
Yep.
where we are actually using the AI to identify and build the product roadmap, right? And that AI is kind of independent of the AI feature we're trying to build. They are
Yes.
completely different thing, right? In
Yep.
the pillar two, I think you are trying to focus on what AI features to build, but then you are bringing the human factor or at least the user first mentality to frame the problem, right? So now
Yep.
moving on. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious to know
Yeah,
more.
thank you. And that summary was really good. So, yes, now pillar number three is also the place where data scientists have a superpower. In fact, in pillar three, data science is way more important than product management. And this is to have a clear data strategy for the AI features that you're implementing. Now, what does that mean, data strategy? Data strategy means data collection, data collection, and data management. So when I'm thinking of data collection, that essentially means ingesting data. Now, if you're ingesting data for training your model, you have to think of whether that data is legal to ingest or not, and whether that data can be used or not. So for example, let's say you're building an app that is meant to help restaurants decide what they could do to maximize the chance of getting 5 stars on Yelp. So that means that here Yelp stars become your objective function. And then you can think of features as variables. One feature could be music, whether music exists or not in the restaurant.
Hmm.
Another feature could be whether alcohol is served or not. So many features, and sure, you would have binary data for each of those for a lot of restaurants. Easy to build, maybe a neural network or maybe a simple algorithm that for a new row, it predicts the L stars. And it's also easy to see which features correlate more with the objective function here. So that's all good. But what if in the restaurant data itself, you have data about states, California, Massachusetts, etc. State itself is a qualitative variable. It cannot be consumed by a mathematical algorithm. So now you have to binarize it. So instead of having one state variable, you have to have 50 state variables. Is California 0 or 1? Is Massachusetts 0 or 1? Only one of those will be 1, others would be 0. But this binarization needs to happen. So while collecting the data, you have to make sure that the data can be used by a mathematical algorithm. So that's part of data collection. Legality, we talked about. And then we have data management. In data management, the most important thing is bias mitigation, bias that we touched upon earlier,
Hmm.
making sure that it's, of course, when looking at data, it's really easy to see. Let's not ingest any demographic information. Let's remove all the columns that describe gender. Sure, a lot of times, a lot of non demographic data too can lead to biases as well. And that is where data science really comes in with its superpower to understand biases. So that is something that's really important to mitigate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is in the pillar three, I can see a lot of intersection from product management side plus the data science side, because when data science side is kind of trying to build the solution, the early stage, like the example that I mentioned about earlier about data cleaning and doing the exploratory data analysis, we call it EDA mostly, is that right? So you understand the distribution of data, a skewness in data, you understand the missing values, which is extremely
Yes,
important. And the thing that you touched upon was the feature engineering piece, that we make sure data is kind of like a converted into right format, so the ML models is kind of like ingesting in the proper way to make the prediction properly, right? So those are all I think data science side also kind of deals with during their project roadmap, or at least in the milestones of their projects. So it's kind of like nice to see the intersection of where this data strategy from this framework you know kind of aligns with the uh, daily work, or at least the preliminary
Yeah,
work that data scientists do on a daily basis, right? I must deal with that a lot of times every day.
that's yeah, and that's really awesome to see. The
Yeah.
thing is, as product managers, it's really easy to overlook all of this. It's really easy to think, let's bring in this feature.
Hmm.
This would help the customers in this manner. But what you just described and what I described in Pillar 3,
Hmm.
if product managers start taking that up and start looking at that as well, start partnering with data scientists to actually delve deeper into Pillar 3, then that would be so much better. Um, and that would help so many companies.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So, I mean, we covered three pillars, and I think for my listeners, I will summarize briefly, and please add, right? So if I miss anything, so the pillar one, we are using AI for creating a product roadmap based on your historical product features, what worked well versus not, and you can even utilize some basic traditional ML approach to see what is your function that you're trying to optimize and its dependencies or correlation you want to understand. So then you can probably focus on those features, right? So you want to identify your features that matters, right? And in pillar two, I think you are trying to use what AI features to build, right? So ultimately, based on that roadmap, the same high ranked features, whether they positively or negatively correlated. If it is negatively correlated, what are the strategies you should do to lower it versus improve it versus not improve it in a way? What features to build? I think focusing on that was kind of like a second pillar, and the secret sauce on the second pillar was the human first, or like user first factor, where throw out the AI out of the window first. Don't think
Yep,
from machine learning aspect. Just think about a normal human being. What
yep,
if I put that person in charge to solve this problem would have done, right? And then try to understand and then scale it. That's kind of like the main highlight of pillar two. And on pillar three, you covered about data strategy, where I think the data is the main important thing here, right? Like, and but like you have to make sure the validity of the data. You have to make sure the data is ready. So there's kind of like a collecting the data versus managing the data, right? So all that gets
yes,
covered on the data strategy. Did I summarize
yep.
it well?
You did really well. Thank
Okay.
you. Just two things to add. In pillar two, if a product manager, as a PM, if you're under pressure to bring in AI, then yes, think about, of course, all the human solutions while throwing
Hmm.
AI out of the window, and then choose those solutions that work better with scale, and then implement AI, in those. Then that's number one. And then number two, in data strategy, yes, legality is something that I know data scientists also think about a lot, whether it's legal to use that data or not. So that is something that you should also keep in mind, that you're allowed to use that data.
Awesome. Yeah. So now one of the factor that I'm thinking when you were describing the pillar three was, and all the pillars, in fact, where does this experimental design or experiment, right? So we have to make sure that something we build has to be tested, right? So, and there's a whole different strategy for maybe like A/B testing or setting up the experiment, where you want to make sure you don't roll it out before you testing it out, right? So I would think that is kind of like outside of this framework, right? The experimental design
Yeah.
falls on its own, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. That's such a great question. So once you're ready to roll it out, how do you test whether your idea was good or not?
Mm-hmm.
This is where this is where actually the normal product management practice of building a go-to-market strategy could really come into picture. And
Mm-hmm.
this is where data science could really come into picture too. So instead of rolling it out fully, think of rolling it out to maybe a subset of users, do an alpha release, and then this is where product management and data science can really partner together to think of metrics. And when I think of metrics, I'm thinking of two kinds. Number one are the product metrics, as in
Mm-hmm.
daily active users or daily engagement, etc. So those are product metrics. Data science metrics are essentially, let's say, precision and recall, area under
Mm-hmm.
the curve, etc. Things like that. Those things. Be ready to actually start tracking both during your alpha release. And then based on what you see, then think of expanding or going back to the drawing board.
Changing a gear a little bit here is how you blend your technical life with the personal life is one of the interesting topic I ask for most of my guests.
Thank you for asking this question. That actually gives me a chance to talk more about how I handle product management and my personal life. So for me, it's all about getting into the zone of what I'm doing. I typically prefer to go to the office on all days of the week. And while going to the office, while I'm on the bus in the morning, I typically think about what my day is going to be or what my day is going to be like. And then in the evening time, when I'm coming back, I slowly move my mind back to my personal life and typically to what I'm going to cook for dinner. So getting into that zone using the commute time really, really helps. And that brings me to my biggest interest, food. I love eating and not just eating. I love exploring cuisines of the world and I love seeing and I love watching how cuisines have evolved all over the world. In fact, a few years ago, I even had a cooking blog that I wrote on for quite a few years. For me, just like product management, cooking itself is an art and a science. There are going to be times when you're going to fail. So, one example, I love eating biryani, and biryani is not just one dish. If you look at the whole South Asian region, different states in India, including, and of course, different countries, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all of them have different recipes of biryani. Now, I have been researching a lot on Indian recipes like Lucknowi, Hyderabadi biryanis, and sure, I have cooked a lot of biryani, but I have failed more number of times. More number of times it has happened that I cooked biryani and it turned out so bad that is inedible. So yes, cooking itself can be a science, which does include successes and failures.
Of course, yeah. That kind of reminds me of a fun fact that our professor, when I was in the masters on my data science lecture in UCST, one of the professor brought up a really good example of how you can kind of like use the analogy of cooking with the machine learning process. Like the preparation work and everything you do, cleaning up, chopping things up is kind of resembles with doing a lot of that 80% of your data prep work. You don't do it right, your food may not turn out good. That means your model may not come out good. So that example has stick to me so far. Today was kind of like I could
Yeah.
relate to that, like, hey, it is an art, of course, right? And it is a process. If it was doing, I mean, easy, I mean, I'm not great at cooking, so I need to learn more.
Day. And essentially the competition is with oneself. So yeah.
All right, so we'll cover another topic that is kind of near and dear to me is the mentorship. I do provide some mentorship on my own, my free time, and I also get help when needed, from both sides, being a mentee and mentor. I have kind of seen the tremendous value of it. I just wanted to see on your career how the mentorship has played a role and what are your suggestions for the listeners, right?
Absolutely. And thank you for this question. It's a really, really important question. My biggest mentors have been my parents, my father and my mother. In fact, my father was an engineer through and through back in India. He used to get into the details of every machine that he tinkered with. In fact, the company that he worked at, a steel plant, by the time he retired, he probably knew about every nut and bolt and even the big picture of how the system worked, even better than the CEO or the chairperson of the Steel Authority of India Limited. That was the level that he had. My mother, on the other hand, is the most empathetic person I know. I sometimes feel like she can read minds and feelings. Even in our extended family, she's the person that people come to whenever they're facing a tough situation in life. Learning from them has been the biggest honor and a privilege that I could have asked for. In fact, I feel like immensely lucky for being born to them. So yeah, the two biggest mentors there. Now, there are a few more people whom I must acknowledge. Number one is Professor Robert Siegel at Stanford Graduate School of Business, who taught me how to really think in terms of use cases and in terms of hypotheses and in terms of systems. Professor Jonathan Levab, also at Stanford GSB, who taught me the questions I should be asking when gathering any customer data. And finally, Professor Stuart Coulson, the professor of design for extreme affordability at Stanford University, who taught me how to logically empathize, not just empathize, but how to logically empathize with people you're building for. So overall, I have been lucky to have found great mentors. And thank you for that question.
No worries. I think I love to hear everyone's take about mentorship, and just because I love this topic so much that mentorship can sometimes change someone's career, right? And at
Yes.
least transform it. a different way, and they always have that view that we may overlook, right? And that's the best part. Talking to many folks, I think when you brought up your own parents, I think that's very interesting. We often don't realize that our mentorship journey has begun since our childhood, the way we grew up looking at it and getting inspired by them, right? I always also have a similar thought, like on one side, like the parenthood, they are, providing the enough mentorship that their kid will be successful tomorrow, right? Father, always, to me, when I look at it, it has inspired me to build the skills, like you said, right? How do I succeed? Why skills matter, right? And mother, on the other hand, like you said, the empathetic leader, right? So
Yeah.
any product today, and I think empathy is something that I would say probably the feature that
Yeah.
we don't talk about but should exist in each product, right? If the product is
Yes.
not covering the empathy, I think, and for that, I think naturally most of us, have learned that. And and sometimes I feel like where do we forgot those uh, features to include in the product, right? So it has been, or it should be there all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, you're right. And that is why product is an art and a science. Science means focus on skills, metrics, and whatnot. The art is the empathy. The art is the understanding of feelings. And you need to do both in product management.
Yeah, yeah. Product management is definitely a very promising career track, and it's challenging to work with product all the time, and they are handling multiple projects at the same time, making sure that technical requirements are met, making sure that stakeholders are aligned, making sure that we are still in the schedule to deliver on time. So there's a lot of things, right? And I have a huge respect for them. But that's because, like, I take the requirement and I start coding and I start doing my data science work, but that is just one piece of the work or item to track on the product manager's end, right? So and they have quite a bit. So I always feel for them for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so we are coming to an end, and I think this is where I think the time goes and flows very fast, and I don't realize most of my conversations are extremely interesting. And today, I think we were covering that framework so well and so deep that like it's a lot of learning, and that was the main theme for my show today, to bring you and chat about that. How that alliance come into picture. How can that help with other product managers who are kind of like engage in the AI projects. So I think that's good that we covered kind of like give enough time on that. All right, for some of the last topics, I have maybe one closing remarks about your suggestions for job seekers
Hmm.
today. Like the market is not pretty and everyone is trying to do their best, to stay in the game. And yeah, still, like, what will be your final thoughts, just to give them some hope and some advice at the end, right? So
Yes, absolutely. And that's such an important question these days. I would say, and this is something that has worked for me in the past. Build real relationships with recruiters. Recruiters, they are the unsung heroes behind every great career move. In fact, a lot of job seekers spend their energy thinking about how to impress hiring managers. But especially in today's market, the hardest part is not the interview, it's getting a chance to be in that room. And that
yes.
is where the recruiters come in. And good recruiters, they don't just match resumes to the roles. They look for potential and then they advocate for you and they fight for you to be seen. And that's why I've actually come to deeply respect their work. And which is why I treat every conversation with a recruiter as a beginning of a real partnership. Even if you may or may not get a job this year, completely possible that something may pan out a few years down the line.
Mhm.
That's why I prepare, I follow up, and I try to make their jobs easier. Because when a recruiter believes in you, then they can actually really help you. When they see that you respect their time, then they remember you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree that point. Before you even get there,
Yeah?
your first point of contact is to build that
Yep.
strong relationship with the recruiter. And today, and you said it extremely well, that we cannot get through the first gate, then you cannot, implement or apply anything that you have learned or prepared for. So most of the recruiters I worked so far has been very nice to bring all the information they can. For the most part, I think they have been helpful, and it has to be always two-way conversation. I see that many times we are too quick to blame on recruiters that, hey, they didn't give me proper information, they didn't help me out properly, or they didn't help me out enough. But if you look back, take a step back, what are the things that you have done from your end, right? So if you have done it, then of course, then if it didn't work out, then yes, you tough luck. Sometimes you get recruiters like that. But for the most part, I would say probably majority of the part, you will get a very good traction, very good help from them if you put the right amount of effort
Yeah,
from your end, right? So that's a very good
absolutely.
suggestion. Yeah, I really like that, because most of the times we kind of ignore the fact that building network and connections is not only with hiring managers or the hiring team, or people who are working already in the company on that team versus the recruiting team, right? So that's very important to understand. Yes. All right, so we come to an end, and I enjoyed our conversation so much. I will definitely catch up offline with you. Before
Absolutely.
I kind of like close it out, thank you so much for coming to my show, and it was a pleasure talking to you. I wish you all the best in your upcoming journey.
Thank you so much, Nirmal, and thank you so much for having me. And the pleasure was mine as well. It was so great to talk to all the product managers and the data scientists who are listening to this podcast. So thank you everyone for listening to our conversation. And thank you so much once again, Nirmal, for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Take care. Bye bye.
You too. Take care.